But you also got to say, how did we get here? And I was here for that. And that was when the city council, many city councils ago, decided to sell water to Exxon Sabic that we didn't have, and promised that water. And then it happened again and again with different industries. And now it's caught up to us. And now we're in a bad situation where there's almost a panic, like, oh, we're gonna run out. And they should have thought of that, but before they said, yeah, come to town, we'll sell you water, keep coming, we need as much as possible, because it has to be sustainable.
This year's regional water plan finds us at nil population growth, past and future, yet the water usage is projected to increase 54% due to industrial demand. That's odd. How do you get more jobs from industry with no population growth? Note that the guideline for water usage by a city is 10% for industry, and we're currently over 40%. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenEye, foresees the first one-person, $1 billion company, a unicorn. AI and data centers are a clear example of what we need to protect our resources from: huge resource draws for the benefit of a very few. Having figures of merits and a healthy resource plan with limits is how we prevent this. What resources will provide us a good future? Physics is the tell. Surface water, our long-standing resource, requires the least pressure, imparting the lowest energy and cost. We are blessed, and we have more of this to capture and store. It is water for people. Groundwater is also a natural resource, with some ready to use and some slightly saline, requiring a small amount of salt to remove to make potable water. Accordingly, it requires a bit more energy and costs a bit more. Seawater desalination requires the highest pressure, high energy consumption, yields water at the highest cost. This is where you go when the other two options aren't available. Seawater RO, on the energy basis you see here, is what drives everything all the way through. And I say to let the industry and the unicorns fund that high pressure and use the lower cost, lower pressure, inherently more friendly to us options to use.
I'm just going to harp on the IDAs and the potential of that revenue, and because in context with the desalination plan and the rate impact to residents. The slide shows it was just ideas of what 50 million could do impact to the city. And that 50 million is talking about the IDA revenue that the city was talking about that they'd be getting in around 2031 from 3 companies, and using that revenue to offset the rate impact to residents from the projects. So this 50 million isn't just in the future. This is what we've been missing out on because of allowing them to have these deferrals. Like, you could provide so many 60,000 or more jobs in healthcare, and public transit, in libraries, getting public input for residents. And the big picture is that, if we're worried about job loss and economic growth, there's other avenues to get there, and it's not just what's been talked about here. And so just wanting more transparency with the industrial district agreements, making sure that the pilot payments, because the payments that we receive are based on valuations, and that's just not like a set number. Those can range, especially when you can appeal them. So when there's hundreds of millions on the table and potentially just 50 million, what the impact of that could have to city services, it's something that we should see how exactly these payments are coming in, and if it's equitable to the residents, because these same companies put us in this situation because of their water demand. And they also, it's very relevant, the pollution to the air and the water that their manufacturing and their operations cause. That has to do with the public safety of the IDAs. What do these incentives bring into our community and city, and what's the impact, and factoring that into if they're a good deal for us or not. So yeah, there's alternatives that could materially impact and benefit people's life and impact the budget and provide us way more revenue in the budget to offer services. And I just feel like overall the average resident in Corpus, the percentage of people that actually know what's exactly going on or even have any kind of understanding about the budget at all, I would think that's a really low percentage of our population of people that actually understand what we could do, what the options are. We could be a change for the better. Like, there's all types of stuff going on here beyond just our city, national national and in the world, and we could be a change for the better because there's options. We're asking you to look at other alternatives, and next week just consider all the residents that have given input and those that can't be in here or don't know what's going on that would be financially impacted by the rate increases. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, council members. Today I'm going to talk about groundwater, the Evangeline project. It's been in the news a lot lately, and I think people are starting to get curious about groundwater, so I wanted to share some resources. The first resource I want to share is the aquifers of the Gulf Coast of Texas. It's a 300-page paper with a ton of chapters about different groundwater issues. And it covers basically any issue you can think of with groundwater, but it covers, for example, subsidence, brackish desalination, groundwater management. So a quick factoid, did you know that the Gulf Coast aquifer contains about 1/5 of the estimated quantity of brackish groundwater that is usable for desalination in Texas? I didn't know that. That's kind of cool. If you do read one chapter, I recommend reading this chapter, The Challenge of Managing Groundwater in the Gulf Coast Aquifer. Even though it was written in 2006, it feels like it was written today. The author was literally predicting the future, so I highly recommend that chapter. The next resource that I wanted to share is the San Patricio County Groundwater District Conservation District's website and their district management plan. Basically, what they do is they choose a desired future condition for their groundwater resources. So like 1 foot less of the water table every year, something like that. And they plug that number into a groundwater availability model, and then that dictates how much groundwater is available for use. It's in the management plan, and if you look at it, it shows that 43,000 acre feet per year is available for use based on the desired future conditions that they chose. And the last resource, that's way less than Evangeline, right? Or way more than Evangeline. Evangeline's like 2/3 of that. The last resource is how much water CCW sold to San Patricio Municipal Water District. Last year it was 41 million gallons. That's about 1/3 of our water use. So in conclusion, whiskey is for drinking, water is for sharing. We share 1/3 of our water resources with San Patricio County. The least they could do is share some of that burden with us. Because at the end of the day, the water rights owner wanted to sell their water rights. If we didn't buy it, someone else would have. Could have been an AI center, could have been the next Exxon, right? The coastal bend needs long-term, dependable, affordable supplies of water. State law recognizes groundwater should be available for these purposes. So instead of pointing fingers at each other and pitting communities against each other, I believe that we need to work together to figure out how to utilize these resources in a way that's equitable for everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening. I think it's extremely important for the community to be aware of this situation. I hope not to get interrupted.
Yes, I did. That was a question.
And why? Why would you do that if it's not supported by your analysis?
Because at the time when they were saying that it would help out downtown, then, I'm fine with that. I can understand that.
Okay, so in other words, would it be fair to say that falls again then over on the politics side?
Yes.
Okay, so the politics of it were for you to get behind it? Yes.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Ask individual questions. So what you're telling me then is that the mayor had definitely been made aware that the altered federal document used at the time of the first reading to support the request for $2 million, that even though it had been a federally altered document, she was still, had indicated she's still okay with moving forward and approving it.
Correct.
And same thing for Mike Pusley.
Correct.
And if I heard you right earlier, it sounds like same thing for Roland Barrera because of what you explained earlier.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't know, from memory, I'm going to tell you who I believe I told. I may have told others, but I'm not for sure. But I know I told the mayor. I know I told Councilman Roy, Councilman Pusley, and maybe Councilman Suckley. But for sure, Pusley and the mayor in one phone call. It was right after I had met with the architect.
You all just heard the voices of Mike Culbertson of the Economic Development Corporation and Peter Zanoni's depositions in a lawsuit against the city. What I learned from hearing these testimonies is even knowing that federal documents had been altered, tampered with, and or forged, individuals were politically pressured to endorse a project that did not fall within legal parameters, and the city manager and city staff still allowed the project to be presented as viable, and the concerns were not shared with other council members. In comparison to the $1.2 billion experimental desalination project, this was only a $2 million tax incentive. Imagine the chaos the $1.2 billion Inner Harbor project will bring. The architect firm involved in this lawsuit is also involved in the Inner Harbor desal project. If they are willing to lie and forge federal documents for $2 million, we would be extremely naive and gullible to not understand that this illegal behavior will probably repeat itself throughout the $1.2 billion Inner Harbor desal project. Millions have been spent with little to no monitoring and nothing to show for it. This is an absolute disgrace. The people of our community deserve better. It is time to pull the plug on the Inner Harbor desal project. Dishonest city staff, the city manager, and complicit council members should no longer be trusted, and they should be removed. Have the day you deserve.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Residents are not being heard, expert opinions are being ignored, and our water is being tapped out by big industry. In an article June 8, 2024, Fighting for 40 Years, the tiny Texas community facing down big industry, a resident described the Bay as a place where the community could bike, birdwatch, and have some quality of life. Now that's all under threat. Those in power don't care about the people. They don't care about our natural resources. The city has a long history of selling out the community water to corporations. What was said was, while residents are subject to restricted water access and face fines as high as $500, industrial water customers can buy drought exemptions from the city council. Hillcrest residents stated, big industry feels that they can just walk all over us, and that's what they've been doing for the last 20 years. They also state the fear of worsening health conditions, because in 2021, a health report conducted by Nueces County researchers found that they had a life expectancy 15 years shorter than people living in other parts of the coastal bend. A health survey of Refinery Road showed higher rates of asthma, 2 types of birth defects, and certain cancers compared to other areas of the city. Experts advising against the Inner Harbor in an article in Texas Monthly, Corpus Christi first water desalination plant could create dead zones. December 2024, it says that desal plants in California and Saudi Arabia avoid dumping their discharge into coastal bays and instead send it to deeper bodies of water. The OCC maintains that the Inner Harbor project will have negligible impact to CC Bay and aquatic life, yet the discharge sits right where experts have warned could create suffocating dead zones for marine life. Other researchers caution that the modeling used by the city to predict the outfalls reach is giving state regulators an incomplete view of the plant's impact. The discharge brine could cause hypoxia, a lack of oxygen. Christian Nielsen, an aquatic toxicologist and assistant professor at the University of Texas Marine Science Institute, says it causes fish and pretty much everything else to die. She and others warned that the evaluations used by the city provided to TCEQ undertake the environmental risks. Big industry tapping out our water supply. According to the fiscal year 2023, the largest retail water customers by billed usage were Valero, 9 million plus MGD, Flint Hills, 6 million plus MGD, Lyondale, 5 million plus MGD, and Citco, 4 million plus MGD. Okay, so we need to listen to our citizens, not industry. Thank you.
You know, I really feel for you guys. I looked at the agenda for next week. Like, that's what I've talked about, meeting lengths, 5 items today, 35 next week, and there are some serious items that I hope you guys are going to discuss about. And, you know, I kind of wonder, like, where are you at in a mental space when you're at 9 o'clock at night, you've had to go through public comment, and you're having to discuss some of these serious items, talking about increasing fees, talking about water. It's almost like they are setting you up for failure. And you know who else is setting you up for failure? Flower Bluff ISD with your Hart Library. So what you have in your hand is actually a petition that's been circulating since August 8th in response to the budget and concerned community members contacting library advocates like me regarding cuts to the library budget. On the 19th, during last public comment, we turned in the first batch of people who signed it, and it was at 304. On the 28th, it's risen to 461. So in just 20 days, almost 500 people are asking you to not defund our libraries, and the response is just to roll over to Flower Bluff ISD, it almost seems like. You know, Hart is a city library.
That is a city library that is on a complex agreement that people are just not being transparent about. People are not getting the required notice. I go to those library advisory board meetings every single month. I'm there, I'm talking to people. Not once did CCISD talk to us about their concerns, neither did Flower Bluff ISD. They make it sound like at that town hall that people can just run through that library and get into our schools and just start shooting it up. And that is just a flat out lie. The doors are locked to the high school. And did you know that the high school is only really using that library for a study hall? You know what they do at Vets? They use the cafeteria. They multi-purpose because they have that need. So if Flower Bluff ISD really needs that library, why don't they do a bond? The taxpayers are bonded out and TERS'd out. And we're gonna just stick the library funding for this new library in this new bond. You know, and at the same time, in the same breath, people are like, well, we're pouring all this money into La Retama. You're pouring money into La Retama because the voters said, do it in 2022 with the bonds. So don't pat yourself and say, we're giving money to the library. No, the taxpayer has been giving money to the library. So if Flower Bluff ISD really needs that library and we really need to keep our students safe, why don't they propose a bond? Why do we have to put that in our bond? Why is the taxpayer getting thrown out onto the street? Why are these school issues now our issues? And there's so many violations in that contract that most of you guys have probably not even gotten to see or even read. That's not screaming transparency. That's leaving us out in the dark. No library for District 4 or District 5. What a shame.
I want to talk about our libraries. Libraries are so important. They provide, they're more than just a place to store books. They provide all kinds of services. I was doing some research this week. There are some libraries that use some states and cities use their libraries to help their homeless population not be homeless anymore. They help them receive services to get IDs, work on the resumes, they work on having a physical address because that is actually something that's really important to getting a job. There are, I think somebody mentioned before that there are some libraries that lend out pots and pans to people who maybe are just getting started and just need something to cook with for a little while. I love Janet F. Hart Library. It's been my library for years. I went to school in the Bluff for 12 years. I remember checking out books from that library when I was in high school, and now I check out books for my kids and myself as an adult. We gotta stop defunding our libraries. We're putting $1.2 billion into a desal plant that most of the city doesn't want, and how far could that go towards sorting out our library issue? And a lot of our issues, like crime statistics, like homelessness, all of those things would actually be served well by putting money into our libraries. On the point of desal, in the little time I have left, I just want to say, when there is nobody that can survive in our environment because it has been ruined, who is this industry going to employ? There's not going to be anybody coming for tourism. There's not going to be any fishing. Our economy is going to tank and will become yet another ghost town. So thank you.
When we have a city council that lies to us or breaks the law, it's embarrassing. It should be embarrassing. It's a stain on our city. For those of you who have to get windstorm or policies, if we forge something on those documents, we're in trouble. So my dad always said, if you're gonna tell a little white lie, what's the big lie you're covering? When I look at and wonder why some people are so deep in with desal, I wanna get to the bottom and follow the money. For those of you sitting on the council and seem to keep getting richer and richer, I wonder, you're not making it off your $6,000 a year. I have to work 2 jobs. I have a master's degree and I own my own business. If water rates go up from desal, I can't afford to stay in business. I'll have to pass it on to my tenants. And I know some of you think an extra $50 a month on water, I know that's some of you's hair gel bill, but my tenants can't afford that. Maybe they can get a part-time job at the Costco we were promised. When we're promised false things just to get elected, it's embarrassing. But mainly when I heard that video just now, every one of you up here should be embarrassed for our city, and even those that didn't take part in it, and especially Mr. Pusley, who comes back, he's not on council anymore, and criticizes everyone who goes against him for desal. Shame on you, Mike Pusley. I wish you were right here so I could say it to your face. Shame on you for every time I post something, you coming back. We can't afford that if our water rates go up. Our city's not paying for it. But if you'll tell one lie, that's because you're covering up another lie. Please, we deserve better and know that there are other people. It may seem like the same ones of us come up and speak, but we're speaking for people who are afraid to come up. They're literally afraid of their business. They think that we're run mafiosa style.
I am a lifelong resident of Corpus Christi, and I have a deep love for the people of my city. I am here to express my thoughts regarding the proposed operating budget for the 2025-2026 fiscal year. I believe that there is a false assumption that comes with the prioritization of our local police department and our city's funding. While I don't know what it takes to run a city, I know what it takes to be a resident, and as a resident, I know that our city is most definitely in need of a better system for public safety. I believe that we should reallocate the funds into the services that prevent crime instead of monitoring it after it has happened. If you combine the proposed funding for our homeless services, our physical and mental health services, and our libraries, the total percentage makes up merely half of what is proposed to be spent on the law enforcement, despite the recent updates with La Retama. In a perfect world, we could use this money to invest into a better quality of life, further challenging the climate that enables so much of the crime that exists in our city. The unfortunate reality, however, is that we don't live in a perfect world, and although I can't say that this would completely eliminate the existence of crime, this allocation provides so much more of a solution than what we currently have. I mean this respectfully, but I cannot name a single instance where I have felt protected or served from our police department, and I know that I'm not alone in saying that. I think back to January of last year where my car got broken into. My windows were smashed in, my center console was disabled, and my steering wheel was completely removed. The police did not prevent this crime. In fact, by the time I woke up and called a report, it wouldn't be for another 2 hours until a singular officer showed up while I waited outside. I was given a singular business card and a verbal diagnosis of, well, it looks like your car got broken into. That sucked. I think back to the 7 officers who showed up to remove a singular man from my place of work downtown, 7 officers who placed this man on the concrete outside while they all stood in a circle around him for 30 minutes. The funding is there, we see it, but this funding isn't providing any sort of solution. So why are we paying so much for a service that does so little? And I don't say this to just, bash the police department, but I do believe that we have a big issue with our homeless population, and we can't expect things to get better if we're only moving in circles. For someone to be picked up, jailed, and then released a few blocks down, that doesn't solve anything. From District 1 to District 5, from Hillcrest to Flower Bluff, we're all residents under the body of Christ, and as residents, I believe that we deserve more in that regard. Thank you.
I'm just going to talk about the budget input session from yesterday. While I feel it's a better format than last year, I still don't think it's good enough. Y'all are voting on the budget next week, and then y'all are having these budget input sessions and saying y'all are gonna listen to the citizens, but whenever we go up there and present our issues or present alternates or present solutions, we're met with excuses. It's never like, that's a good point. It's always, well, we're doing this, so we don't have to listen to you. One thing I've been harping on a lot lately is trees. There are many studies that show investing in parks and green spaces actually reduces crime more than investing in the police department. It creates safe neighborhoods. It creates places where the community can congregate and be with each other. All you have to do is a simple Google search. I found information on the EPA website stating how trees also help with the watershed. They help with water. They help with our water issues, especially natural native trees. I spoke to the Parks and Rec representatives yesterday and asked, for instance, why there weren't more trees in Gold Park. The excuse I was given is that nothing grows there but palm trees. Those palm trees that are there aren't even native. Those are California palm trees. They're not native to this area. They're not native to this city. So honestly, that was a weak excuse to me. And it may seem counterintuitive to plant more trees considering we're in stage 3 drought restrictions, but if the city's already using effluent water, they're not using our drinking water. They're not using water that people would use. So it's not taking away from anything. So to me, that's also a weak excuse. Time spent in nature immediately adjacent to home helps people relieve mental fatigue, reducing aggression. Green residential spaces are gathering places where neighbors can form social ties that produce stronger, safer neighborhoods. Barren spaces are more frightening to people and are more crime-prone than parks landscaped with greenery and open vistas.
Thank you.
I also wanted to address something that I had mentioned at last night's District 1 budget input session, specifically around democracy and transparency, and also quality of life programs. At these budget input sessions, community members are coming up and expressing genuine concern about the material conditions that they are facing in their everyday lives. Instead of taking note in order to address these issues, city council members and city staff that are in attendance are basically defending themselves and patting themselves on the back. For instance, community members last night expressed concern for our unhoused neighbors and friends, and instead of genuinely listening, y'all are basically patting yourselves on the back for adding one staff person to address houselessness services. Adding one staff member for houselessness services is not a solution. Behavioral crisis response programs, counseling services, accountability processes, recovery programs, evidence-based like youth prevention programs, functional family therapy, targeted diversion programs, those are real solutions. All of these are outlined in the people's budget, which I believe y'all received last city council meeting or the one before. Like many other community members have talked about today, I think it is utterly ridiculous that the police budget is basically half of the budget, and we are investing in things like virtual reality for police instead of quality of life programs for residents that will improve health and reduce crime. Lastly, do not invest an additional $50 million of our money on desalination. Not only is it an environmentally racist project, it's too expensive, and our money is being used to provide water for heavy industry. How dare you minimize the material conditions and concerns of the people that you are supposed to represent?
I take a lot of pride in my occupation as a teacher, but I carry the responsibility of advocating for my students and the next generation that will inherit the city and the planet. I am here today, despite my nerves, to try to live up to those values and fulfill that responsibility. I think it's really crucial for any leaders to be able to constantly assess and reassess based on the current material conditions and knowledge that we may not have previously had. It is for that reason I want to strongly advise against moving forward with the Inner Harbor desalination plans and any subsequent desalination plans. I think it makes sense to consider all options, and for a while, desalination seemed to have been the best option. I think we know more now, and that is no longer the case. It seems clearer and clearer that desalination would not only wreck our bay, but that would also be far too costly on our community, which is already overburdened with an industrial build-out and expansion that decrease public services and quality of life programs. According to research by Dr. Paul Montaña of the Heart Research Institute, Corpus Christi Bay is already burdened by over-salinity. Even small increases in salinity, not to mention the excessive amounts of proposed industrial brine, could severely impact the ecosystem, including species abundance and diversity. Our communities in the city cannot afford to keep centering our entire economy around polluters that have put our health and the future of our planet constantly at risk. Please consider what this would do to your legacy as city leaders if you effectively continue to sacrifice Hillcrest and other communities at any interest of these industries who are not paying their fair share in taxes and do not care what happens to us or the next generation. Please submit your legacy as a local leader who was a mindful guardian of our dollars and also put public need over corporate greed. Thank you.
Council and staff, I am here to say thank you, particularly to Councilpersons Vaughn, Hernandez, Cantu, Paxton, and Campos, for all your efforts in demanding staff looking into alternative water solutions. Over the past 2 meetings, our situation has gone from being described as dire to actually seeming quite manageable. Over the past few years, the public has been led to believe that our only path to a reliable, sustainable solution was via the Inner Harbor desalination plant. Today, we have a multitude of short, mid, and long-term solutions before us, and I applaud the efforts of you guys and gals and the staff bringing them forward for consideration. With each passing week, I am further encouraged that we are making excellent decisions for our water future that do not include what I consider to be a very risky project. I do not oppose desalination. In fact, I am certain that it will eventually become a part of our fully diversified water portfolio. But I think it's foolish that we go forth into uncharted waters alone. If the Inner Harbor inevitably fails to produce the promised 30 MGD, the citizens will suffer far greater than the large volume water users that stand to benefit the most. I do not intend to disparage industry. In fact, I am a huge supporter, but the fact is they have options and we do not. I have heard many members of this community describe the anti-desal 5 as short-sighted, but the only thing I view as short-sighted is betting $1 to $2 billion on a risky desal plant that only promises around a quarter of our future demand. Let's find a project where the risk is shared. As the old adage goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Also, I understand the concern regarding the bonds we have already cashed in, but somehow I have a feeling there may still be some flexibility. When and if the Inner Harbor is voted down, if we can agree on the alternatives, reapproaching the Texas Water Development Board with a united front will likely produce favorable results in moving forward with reallocation for the favored alternative projects. Thanks again to the dedicated and courageous Fab Five. And with the last 50 seconds of my time, regarding what Ms. Caballero revealed at this meeting, I've known about this for a little while, and I want to thank Ajit David for the courage to bring forward his own finances, not seeking to recover any of his money or anything lost, but to bring to light something that goes on in this city every single week. And a lot of the folks that are implicated in that have said that folks like Ms. Caballero, myself, and the rest of the people sitting in this peanut gallery are the reasons why this city doesn't move forward. But in fact, the reason why the city doesn't move forward is because of those things that go on. So I'm glad that it's being brought to light, and I hope that everybody that is implicated in it gets what they deserve. Thank you.
Today is a little exciting for me because I have the now rare opportunity to speak on an agenda item before it's considered. Sadly, the only reason I had that opportunity is because of a delay. Typically, a community member would have to be able to physically attend the meeting in person and wait for their item to be called in order to make public comment. Comments made at 5:30 are too late to be considered. What a disgraceful system. On September 2nd, the council will consider moving forward with additional funding on the Inner Harbor Hillcrest neighborhood desal plant. Please use the important authority that you recently pulled back from city staff and refuse to continue to fund this project. Do not fall victim to a sunken cost fallacy and instead make financially, socially, and environmentally responsible decisions for your constituents. I'll use any of my remaining time to define the word boisterous for the benefit of the council, legal, and the community. It is of a person, event, or behavior, noisy, energetic, and cheerful, rowdy. I have repeatedly watched our city attorney, Miles Risley, target specific community members, interrupting or stopping entirely their constitutionally protected speech on the grounds of being boisterous. Last week, Miles Risley interrupted an incredibly calm and measured speaker on these grounds. This speaker was not noisy, energetic, cheerful, or rowdy. Miles Risley objected to the content, the tone, or maybe the appearance of the commenter, and abused his power as city attorney when he attempted to halt their speech. In contrast, I can think of many occasions, and the tapes show it, of when any of those words would be a fair description of the people, events, and behaviors behind this dais. I encourage this council, mayor, and legal department to stop infringing on the protected rights of those they view as political opposition. Also, public comment should be held at 5:30 on Monday, noon on Tuesday, and at every item. Virtual speakers should have an equal opportunity to speak on items.
So I'm making comment today to ensure that I can publicly voice my opinion on the Hillcrest desalination plant ahead of any votes that may be taken at next week's council meeting. I could probably count on both hands and more how many times I've stood before you asking you not to move forward with this project. But while I cannot stand before you in person today, I am here once again asking that you do not support the Hillcrest Water Treatment Campus project any further. Evangeline, Nueces River Wells, reuse projects, large-scale rainwater capture, floating solar are all projects that should be pursued before any desal. And ask yourself, how much water do we need and why? Any decision you make, you will live with, and most of you will live to see the impacts of your decisions. It's not a coincidence that the majority of those opposing this project are millennials, Gen Z, and even Gen Alpha, as we've seen at the last couple of meetings. We have so much to live for that is a sustainable, cleaner, more respectful way to live on this planet. The days of government at all levels making decisions based on greed are numbered because people are awake, paying attention, and keeping receipts. So thank you to the council members who have shown bravery. Please continue to do so. And next week, vote no to this desal disaster and set our course with a more viable, more responsible project. Thank you.
Please refer to the presentation in my written comments. It appears the city started selling a large volume of water to a customer the city has no obligation to sell water to. This is at the same time that is enforcing drought restrictions on residents. I wonder why and who approved this water sale. I haven't seen the council approve this. Council, please find out why the city is selling hundreds of thousands of gallons of water a day to a company that got huge tax breaks because they didn't need any services, including water. As always, have a nice evening.